the second training day within the ISACC project framework. I want to ask first to everyone to switch off their microphones because I can hear some voices in the background and you possibly cannot hear me. So please switch off your microphones if you are currently connected. As I was saying, let's kick off this second and last training day dedicated to the operators in the logistics and transport sector, and also to the companies who are attending. The ISACC project is managed within the Interreg IPA-CBC Italy, Albania and Montenegro framework, and it wants to introduce new regulatory frameworks in the anti-fraud inspections and in the control phases in between Italy, Albania and Montenegro. Today is devoted to security and safety requirements, and specifically customs freight controls. We are going to develop 3 specific topics. That is risk management at European level and cooperation with traders at customs level again, and the European anti-fraud system. Again, today we are having Mrs. Cristina Piangatello talking about these topics, developing them, and possibly answering your questions at the end, questions which you can write in the chat throughout her presentation, possibly around mid-morning, she might actually provide answers to your questions, and also at the end of the training. Again, please switch off your microphones, and going to launch an assessment questionnaire, feedback questionnaire towards the end of the presentation, which we ask you to kindly fill in. So before leaving the floor to Mrs. Piangatello, I want to introduce her. She is an EB teacher, expert in customs and export regulations at international level, and she has good knowledge in terms of international transport shipping law, import and export compliance, international transport and shipping, import and export compliance, F&B, clothing, fashion, automotive and machinery sectors specifically. She's a teacher on import-export, excise duties, VAT related to international trade, logistics and transport. So definitely an expert for today's topic. I leave the floor to Cristina, and of course, enjoy the works, enjoy the presentation. Thanks, Francesca, for this kind introduction again. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to all the attendees in this second webinar related to customs, which is specifically focused on customs risk management, with reference, of course, to the EU regulations, but also trying to extend the context to understand where these guidelines originate from in terms of customs risk management, and to then see how these rules are implemented at a single member state level, with reference to Italy too, of course. I'm going to share my slides. Please confirm that you can see them properly. You see the presentation modality, and also that it works, of course. This is the agenda of today's webinar. So my presentation is going to be focused on the role as regards EU, the World Customs Organization, and the safe framework of standards. And then I'll also give you an overview of EU implementation of these regulations and talking about the main goals of the regulation at EU level again. Of course, we are also going to talk about what is ancillary to this system, in this case applied to the whole supply chain. And within this context, we also have the ISACC project, which we are explaining in these webinars, and particularly which we explained on November 16. So we'll try to understand how in Italy the customs authorities perform their controls based on a risk analysis. Then we are going to talk about cooperation between customs and traders, with reference, of course, to the EU framework, and we are going to specifically deal with the AEO certification, that is this customs certification program of the authorized economic operator. Then we are going to outline the anti-fraud system at European level, focused mainly on the activity of the Anti-Fraud European Office, OLAF, which collaborates with both the European Public Prosecutor's Office and the different member states, so with different groups of experts in the segment. I won't be too long on that, and I'll immediately enter into the focus of the presentation, starting, of course, with the role of the World Customs Organization, WCO, which back in 2005 adopted the SAFE framework of standards, that is a system of framework regulations to facilitate safety and security controls in global exchanges, to make them easier, of course, but also to make them safer, thus to guarantee all safety and security aspects. This international system is quite unique, and it introduced the so-called modern safety and security standards that are required and controlled within an international supply chain. Of course, this also introduced a new approach to the management of freight safety and security, acknowledging this wide collaboration between customs authorities and traders. As of 2005 to now, this safe framework of standards has been regularly updated, because clearly the challenges of global trade are always up to date, and they have to pursue and follow what happens at a geopolitical, political, and economic level. Hence, when new needs and new critical issues have came up in the supply management, of course, the safe framework of standards was updated in line with it. Particularly throughout the years, new provisions have been added as regards the AEO profile, with the indication of how to better coordinate the activities in collaboration with the different customs authorities and also the traders too, to restart trade activities after the events of the last 10 years. Then Pillar 3 in this safe framework of standards was introduced, which is the pillar related to the activities of intergovernmental and customs authorities, and the preloading advanced cargo information was also implemented. That is the need to provide preliminary information on the cargo of freights moved through air transportation. So technological changes, innovation, globalization, they are the pillars that drive the updates of the safe framework of standards, because they do have an impact on the supply chain. And this was also proved by the recent events with the pandemic and the war, as I was mentioning last time, the war between Russia and Ukraine, of course. The latest update of the SAFE program was completed back in 2021 to provide additional assistance to the members of the World Customs Organization and all the interested partners, so not only at national and international level, but also to traders and customs authorities, to recreate and somehow enhance the environment where international trade is performed in a safe way, so as to make these exchanges easier after what happened with the pandemic, after the pandemic. That's why the 2021 update was particularly effective, meaning that it further stressed the need to strengthen cooperation between the customs authorities and also the other government agencies, different agencies, entities and administrations, which somehow
competenza proprio in materia
have a role
di controllo della sicurezza delle
in
merci.
terms of checking
Inoltre, forse nel
freight security.
2021
In the
il
2021
SAFE
version,
ha inteso anche
SAFE
promuovere
also aimed
dei
at
dispositivi
promoting
elettronici
some
per
electronic
uno
devices
smart,
and
insomma, chiamiamoli
tools,
smart,
smart
dispositivi di
tools,
sicurezza, quindi smart, per ottimizzare
to
proprio i controlli
optimize
doganali e quindi
customs
l'efficacia
controls
del
and
monitoraggio
hence
delle
the
merci che sono in
effective
movimento e alla
monitoring
fine
of
di
the
svolgere questo
moved
controllo in
freight,
tempo reale.
so that
Inoltre,
these
sempre sulla
checks can
base
be performed
dell'aggiornamento
in real
del
times.
SAFE,
Again,
ci
based
sono
once
anche
again on the
delle
SAFE
indicazioni
update,
per
there are
sviluppare
indications to
ulteriormente i
further
programmi di
develop
comunicazione doganale AEO
the
e una
AEO
ulteriore
programs
spinta
with a
all'adozione
further push on the adoption
di
of
accordi tra i
agreements
vari paesi a cui ha
between
dato chiaramente
the
via i
different
servizi esteri,
EU
di accordi
and
di non
third-party countries,
riconoscimento
of
o
course,
riferimento
for
proprio
mutual
di
recognition
programmi di
with reference
certificazione
to
doganale
these
applicati, implementati nei vari
specific
paesi.
programs for
In-
customs
e quindi
acknowledgement in
ecco,
the
questo è un
different
po'
countries.
quello che
So
è il portato
this
dell'aggiornamento
is
2021 del
the
programma
update of
SAFE.
2021 as regards the
Soprattutto
SAFE
inoltre
program,
sono stati anche
particularly
date delle indicazioni per quanto riguarda
provisions were given as regards
il rafforzamento della
the
sicurezza del trasporto
strengthening of
aereo
safety
inoltre
security
ecco,
in
sono
case of
anche
air cargoes,
date delle indicazioni
and
per
indications
andare
were
a,
also
come
given
dire, a migliorare la
to
comunicazione
somehow
e
enhance
anche le relazioni
communication and
di quello
also
che viene
the
effettivamente applicato e svolto a livello di
reports
singolo
of
paese
what is implemented and
in
performed
esecuzione
at
insomma
single country
a
level
quello che è stato
to
stabilito
execute
in questo
what
programma.
was defined in the SAFE
Proprio al
program.
fine di superare
To
il periodo
actually
della pandemia e rafforzare
leave the
quindi la
pandemic
resilienza ma anche la
behind
ripresa
us,
delle
bolstering
imprese
resilience
e
and the
delle imprese
recovery of
coinvolte nella catena di
all the companies
approvvigionamento,
involved
in
in the
questo
supply chain.
aggiornamento 2021
The
sono
2021
state
update
implementate delle
also
guide a
implemented
supporto sia delle
some
agenzie governative ma
guides,
anche a supporto degli
guidance
operatori economici, questi
systems to
appunto si
support
possono anche
both
denominare,
authorities
tutte
and
relative effettivamente
traders
proprio alla figura
that all
del
related
verificatore
to
economico
the
autorizzato.
AEO profile.
E, quali sono gli obiettivi e i principi
What are the main
del
objectives and
quadro
principles
SAFE,
of
del
the
programma
SAFE
SAFE?
framework?
Innanzitutto stabilire
First,
standard che
establish standards
forniscano sicurezza
that
e
provide
facilitazione ovviamente della
supply
catena di
chain security
approvvigionamento
and
a livello
facilitation
globale,
at a
proprio per
global level,
promuovere la
to
intesa e
promote
prevedibilità,
certainty and predictability,
consentire una gestione
enabling
integrata e armonizzata
an integrated and harmonized
dell'inquinamento
supply chain
per tutte le
management
modalità di
for all
trasporto.
modes of
Chiaramente, a
transportation,
seconda delle modalità di trasporto,
clearly
ci
depending on
sono
the mode of transportation,
sottoposte a
freights
diverse
undergo
analisi di rischio, ma
different risk analysis. However,
quindi presentano diversi profili di
so
rischio
they
in
show
base alle
different
modalità con cui
risk
vengono
profiles
trasportate, ma di
depending on the
fatto uno degli
modality
obiettivi
used to
del
move
programma
them.
SAFE è quello proprio di andare a
However, one of the
armonizzare
goals of the SAFE program
questi
is to
standard economici
harmonize these
per
safety
tutte
and
le merci,
security
naturalmente a
standards for
prescindere
all
insomma
the
dalla modalità.
freights moved independently
L'altro obiettivo è
upon
quello
their
di
mode of
rafforzare
transport.
chiaramente il
Third,
ruolo, le funzioni,
enhance the
anche le
role, functions,
competenze
and capabilities
delle dogane, delle
of
varie autorità
customs
doganali dei vari
and the
paesi,
different
comunque da lì
customs
alla
authorities
Customs
from the
Organization,
different
per far
countries
fronte
in the
chiaramente
WCO
ad uscire
to
alle
meet
criticità,
the
alle
challenges,
opportunità
opportunities, and
che
critical issues
insomma il sistema mondo dal
that
punto di vista economico nel suo complesso
the whole system
è tenuto a fronteggiare, comunque dovrà fronteggiare in questo
must
XXI
tackle in
secolo.
this 21st
L'altro obiettivo è
century.
quello di rafforzare la
Another
cooperazione tra
goal
le
is to
amministrazioni
strengthen
doganali
cooperation between customs
dei paesi, in particolare
administrations in
appunto
the
proprio per
different countries
capacità
to improve their
rilevare, monitorare
capability
quelle che
to
sono le
detect
situazioni
and monitor
cosiddette ad alto rischio,
high
quindi
risk
quelle che più di altri
consignments,
presentano profili
those that
dal
have
punto di vista della sicurezza
higher risk
doganale,
profiles as
ma anche
regards
rafforzare la
safety and security at
cooperazione
customs level, but
tra
also
amministrazioni
strengthening
doganali al
cooperation between
fine proprio
customs administration
di riconoscere
to
i
acknowledge
viaggiatori economici autorizzati
the
negli altri paesi membri della Customs
AEOs in
Organization
the other member states
e soprattutto finalizzato insomma a questa cooperazione a fine di scambiare
within
informazioni,
the
dati, ma anche
system,
al fine di
exchanging data,
riconoscere
information,
reciprocamente
and
delle
mutually
agevolazioni
acknowledging
e anche di svolgere in
the
maniera reciproca le stesse tipologie
different
di controlli.
activities, also performing the same
Chiaramente
types of
questa
controls.
cooperazione deve anche
Of course,
avvenire tra
this
le varie
cooperation
amministrazioni doganali,
must
poi
take
ovviamente
place
partner,
between the
quindi
different
enti,
customs
ministeri,
administrations and
corporazioni
other
autonome,
governments, agencies,
quelli che
entities,
sono in qualche maniera
all
coinvolti
those who are
nella
somehow
catena di
involved
approvvigionamento dal punto di
in the
vista
supply
anche
chain
della verifica della
from the
sicurezza
point of
e
view
questo
of
chiaramente può essere
checking safety
fatto
and security.
tramite
And of course, this can be
l'adozione e
made through
l'implementazione
the adoption and
dello scaffale
implementation
unico in materia
of the
doganale, di cui
single
abbiamo
window
parlato
for customs, which we
nel
talked
scorso novembre,
about
e
on
quindi
November
in
18.
sostanza questa
And to conclude,
cooperazione deve anche avvenire a livello
this cooperation is also
doganale
to
e
take
di
place at
imprese, quindi
customs level with
soprattutto
the
la
companies, the
cooperazione
industries.
deve essere
Particularly,
fatta tra le
cooperation
varie autorità
must be
doganali nazionali e gli
made
operatori economici che
between
sono
the
stabiliti
customs
nei vari
authorities,
paesi,
national customs
in un clima
authorities,
di
and traders in the different
reciproca e
countries
collaborativa
within a
appunto
framework of mutual collaboration
reciprocità o meglio di collaborazione, ecco, questo
and
volevo dire.
collaboration,
Poi
clearly.
chiaramente tutti questi
Collaboration and
obiettivi
recognition. Of course, all these goals
mirano alla circolazione di
aim
merci
at
a livello mondiale
making
che
freight
siano
circulate at
insomma
world
di
level,
effetti
but freight
considerati con la
that is
programmazione
safe
e
and
quindi sotto
security as
quelli che
under
sono gli
all the
standard
pillars in the SAFE
individuati in questo
project.
programma. Il programma
The
consiste
program
essenzialmente di
consists essentially
5
in
elementi
five
fondamentali
core
perché vengono
elements,
innanzitutto armonizzati i requisiti di
because the first, it provides for the
informazioni
harmonization
effettivamente
of
essere forniti piuttosto che i requisiti
those
che devono
requirements
avere
that
elementi
are
ma
to
anche
be
informazioni che devono essere
provided
fornite
for
per quanto
cargo
riguarda
and information
l'Advanced
to
Electronic Cargo
as regards
Information,
the advanced
quindi
electronic
tutte
cargo
quelle
information.
merci che
So
vengono
all
spedite
those freights and cargoes
a
that
livello
are
internazionale, che
shipped
sono
at international
riuscite in
level,
entrata o in transito in
inbound,
qualsiasi
outbound, or in
paese
transit in
per le quali questo
whatever
occorre
country.
fornire queste informazioni
And this information
anticipate
is
rispetto
to
a
be
quando
provided
le
in
stesse vengono
advance, of course,
definitivamente poi
earlier compared
spedite.
to when
Ogni
the
paese che
freight
aderisce
is shipped.
al programma
Each country
SAFE
that joins the
deve
SAFE
impegnarsi
framework
ad
must
adottare
commit to
diciamo,
adopting a consistent approach, consistent with the program, of course, related to risk management, to address and tackle all the different security threats. In addition, the SAFE program requires that all customs administration from the different nations in the WCO to perform an inspection on outbound or inbound cargoes, specifically those considered to be as high risk, and also inspections on transport systems, transport means, using possibly tools and equipment for detection that might not be intrusive, like specifically some large-scale X-ray machines. And the SAFE framework also gives the benefits that the customs should provide to all the businesses that meet this minimum supply chain security standards given in the SAFE framework of standards, thus trying to benefit more those cases when the implementation of these standards is made in the best way. The last core element of the SAFE project is to promote this close cooperation between the different government entities and projects. Of course, these 5 elements in the SAFE program are somehow implemented and are supported by these 3 pillars. That is, the first one is the one from customs to customs, the second customs to business, and the third pillar is the one customs to other government and intergovernmental agencies, entities, governments, and all the parties.
And then concerning the first pillar, that is to say the custom to custom one, customs should cooperate with the other foreign countries in order to develop some joint programs, plans, strategies, and procedures, allowing them to maximize the management of international transportations and also to start them again when, for example, it was necessary to stop those transports because of COVID, for example, or because of war. And so it is necessary that customs concerning all the different countries belonging to the World Customs Organization have some specific plans, procedures, and programs, or even some safety programs that they can put in place. So it is necessary to always have a B plan that can be put in place in case of interruption of the transport system. This action plan should be shared and common, and it is also fundamental to put in place a specific communication about the different mechanisms, plans, programs, and strategies to face the most difficult aspects of international trade. The key element and key tool concerning the first pillar of the SAFE framework of standards is the usage of advanced electronic information to, first of all, identify high-risk cargo freights and also transport means and transport conveyances. Then all those specific elements and criteria are also confidential, so they are not made public, but actually customs cooperate and they were able to adopt all those criteria to try to identify high-risk freights as soon as possible. And definitely before identifying the general transports and freights, and so to be able to carry out extra verifications and checks before or at the moment of departure. Then, of course, that information needs to be shared with all the other institutional partners and all the other customs. So it is also necessary to have a centralized system collecting information and also, of course, accessible to the different customs and countries. And it should be an interoperable system. So customs adopt new and modern technologies in order to better manage freights. So this is a fundamental part, let's say, of this pillar. Those advanced technologies do not only include a large-scale X-rays, but also a gamma rays machine and all the devices and solutions, giving them the possibility to carry out further extra checks and verifications. And then we have the second pillar, that is to say the customs to business pillar, that is really relevant for businesses and companies in general. So from this point of view, we can say that each customs administration needs to establish some partnerships with the private sector and private operators, also in terms of organizations and private organizations representing the different categories of economic operators in order to develop some common and shared strategies so that the private sector can be fully involved in the implementation of pillar number 2, but also of the general safe framework of standards, and therefore in the security and safety of the international trade supply chain. So those partnerships and those shared programs and strategies can better assure a greater management of the different companies and public institutions of the different verifications and controls that are made at customs. So this is another way to increase the responsibilities of all the actors of the field, because of course they are also in charge of carrying out some verifications and controls apart from those performed by the customs. So those plans and strategies need to take into consideration an assessment on supply chain security. And they also need to identify the most critical points and aspects, and therefore they should also identify the best moments in which it is necessary to carry out the controls and verifications. So thanks to those several partnerships, customs can define some benefits or advantages for all the economic operators involved in this project and complying with the different standards before carrying out all the different operations. So this is true for businesses, but also for the professional operators in part that are part of the supply chain. So not only exporters and importers, but all the logistic operators that play an active role in this supply chain. So let's say that pillar number 2 is specifically made of those elements and aspects. So if the partnership and cooperations between customs and economic operators will be successful, then it will also be possible to minimize the critical aspects concerning transportation and at an international level. Of course, those partnerships and cooperations need to be managed in a diplomatic way, of course, because it is necessary to recognize the different roles and functions, both concerning customs and economic operators. And it is also necessary to recognize the different responsibilities of the different roles. So the relationship between customs and the different economic operators should be developed in this sense and should also develop a new partnership based on safety and security standards. This partnership should also provide the possibility to discuss about the most critical elements and also to understand which is the best way to produce the documents for freight transportation, because of course those certifications assess that all the different operators can be included in the safe framework of standards because they comply with those specific standards. And these partnerships should also be based on technology, so the usage of electronic procedures, electronic tools and devices, and therefore communication becomes fundamental. So the communication of the different operations carried out by customs, and especially the communication from the customs towards the economic operators, and in general communication addressed to the different stakeholders. So this is necessary in order to facilitate and streamline the international trade of freights. Then coming to the third pillar, that is to say customs to other government and intergovernment agencies, We can also include other intergovernment authorities and also ministries. So this cooperation is, again, fundamental in order to comply with all the different standards included in the SAFE framework. So the third pillar has been adopted since the development of the SAFE framework of standards in 2005. This is also the most recent pillar. But even if it is the most recent one, it is also the most important one, because at the base of this pillar, we can also find some mentions concerning the customs single window. So which are the agencies that may be interested in cooperating with customs when it comes to the supply chain, when it comes to the safety and the security standards? So all those intergovernment agencies and customs partners can include, for example, police authorities, interior authorities, agencies operating at the border, but also licensing agencies when it comes to dual use export, for example, but also weapon export. So this is just a short list, let's say, of the different actors that may be involved in the cooperation with customs, but this cooperation will have a mutual interest because, of course, agencies may share common facilities and information, databases, but they can also decide to carry out some targeted assessment and risk assessment in cooperation again with the customs. So we have several agencies that intervene into the international trade, but also at the national level, as we will see in a minute. Here on the slide, you can also learn about the different tools and instruments that customs may use in order to streamline this cooperation. So in here, you can read about some specific documents and agreements, such as the revised Kyoto Convention, but also the IEO Compendium, the Risk Management Compendium, the Coordinated Border Management Compendium, the Single Window Compendium, and so on and so forth. So all those documents are accessible on the website of the World Customs Organization. So let's now have a look at the EU Customs Risk Management Framework. As I said during the previous webinar, customs duties are one of the most important sources of income for the European Union and therefore for its member states. So custom authorities have an important responsibility when it comes to ensure that customs duties are properly applied. And they also have another specific and fundamental function, that is to say that they have to make sure that all the freights are safe and secure. So a lot of goods are managed and transported within the European Union every single day, the quantity of goods has drastically increased in the last decade, again in the European Union, and therefore it is extremely important to carry out targeted controls based on risk management. It is really difficult, of course, to assure that all the goods and all freight can be carefully inspected. So that's why it is fundamental to have a risk management framework when it comes to custom risks, so that extra controls and verifications can be carried out when it comes to high risk freights. And those controls and verifications, and we can say that they are carried out as simple controls and verifications, starting from the different information that can be shared among the different countries and different customs. And in this way, it is possible to assure a flow of goods which is regular, which is streamlined, and with no obstacles at all. Apart from when it is necessary to deal with special, specific situations. But let's say that in general, the different controls and inspections are carried out in a smooth way, despite the great number of goods that are managed every single day within the European customs. So we can definitely say that within the European customs, all the different goods are carefully inspected, and they are also inspected in the countries of departure. So because of this important increase of goods that are moved on a single basis, on an everyday basis in the European Union in the last decade, there are also some other consequences that needed to be taken into consideration. So globalization doesn't only mean that licit trade is increasing, but also illicit trade is increasing as well. That's why it is necessary for every single country to carry out extra controls and verifications when it comes to goods safety and security. Of course, illicit trade is in direct contrast with the EU and Sustainable Development Goals. And when we talk about illicit trade, we talk about counterfeiting, for example, tax evasion, but also trafficking of humans and wildlife, which is protected, normally protected. So if globalization is carried out in a correct, proper, licit, sustainable way, then it definitely represents a real opportunity of growth for all the countries that are involved, so for all the global countries. But actually, all those illicit trade aspects represent a real problem that is also in contrast with the development of the different countries that may actually benefit from international trade. Illicit trade also increase the costs when it comes to the different controls and verifications that customs needed to carry out, or that other agencies, competent agencies, needed to carry out. And again, because of illicit trade, it is even more difficult to meet the different UN Sustainable Development Goals. We know for sure that illicit trade is always present. Every once in a while, illicit trade is discovered by the police forces, but it is still difficult to quantify illicit trade. So it is really difficult to quantify illicit trade that is performed all over the world. There is anyway an estimation, and we can say that it costs to the global economy more than 2.5 trillion of euros, all aspects combined. So the European Union, as for all the other international countries, need to control 100% the different trades in order to avoid illicit trade, counterfeiting, smuggling, trafficking of humans and wildlife, and so on and so forth. So in general, everything and all the activities that are considered as illicit and criminal. So that's why the European Union decided to establish the customs risk management framework, that is to say, a tool in order to give the possibility to European customs to carry out controls and verifications against illicit trade and to double check what may seem or may represent a threat for the European countries and what may represent a threat for the financial economic interest of the European Union. So thanks to the customs risk management framework, the European Union is also able to assure sustainable trade and correct competition for the different economic operators.
So here is the common system for the management of customs controls to provide a quick, easy to use system to exchange information that is somehow related to the risks connected to freight movement at international level, all those cargoes that are inbound, outbound, or in transit in the European Union. However, this common system allows the operating customs affiliates to exchange information and also to talk to the different analysis centers that have been implemented in the different member states. The European Commission defined that to manage customs risks, specific criteria are to be applied to check the cargoes, the freights for safety and security purposes based on electronic information that allows detecting these critical issues earlier compared to when the freight is shipped. Of course, this depends whether the freight is inbound or outbound in the EU. So before the freight is shipped, if outbound, or vice versa when they're inbound and imported from abroad. Clearly, there are two moments when it is possible to check the freight in every single time. So when freight comes into the customs or is declared in the customs to be imported or to be somehow destined to any other customs regime as provided for in the customs code, with a specific reference to some types of risks, so particularly with those freights that are inbound from abroad into the European Union. Well, this situation specifically stresses the need for specific checks, particularly as regards freight safety and security. Those freights that are to be used by EU consumers. However, the question of safety and security of freights, independently upon where they are to be delivered within the European Union, applies with reference to other types of risks too. The framework that defines the rules for customs risk management implemented within the European Union specifically refers to Article 46 in the Union Customs Code. It's based on this article. However, there are several more articles that are to be considered to fully understand how the risk management, how risk is managed at customs level. We have Article 6 as regards means for exchange and storage of information at IT level, common requisites in terms of information and data that are to be acquired by the customs authorities. Article 12 with the reference once again to the communication of this information and of this data. Article 6 on electronic systems, articles from 47 to 50 with a specific reference to customs controls, how they are to be implemented and where they are to be implemented. And all the rules are given in titles from 4 to 6 or Title 8, again, within the customs code. Deep diving into the criteria given in this framework, EU framework, well, these criteria were developed to assess the risks related to freight, risks in terms of safety, security, but also in terms of protection. So here, we always talk about safety and security all together. Protection and safety, security as regards the objective aspect of the goal, and safety instead as regards the subjective role, so protection on the side of everyone who will somehow have to do with these goals. These criteria are then acknowledged and implemented by the member states, and they are somehow included in the risk management system of each single EU customs authority. They are used to perform control activities daily. So control does not undergo any pause periods, but customs control are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. These criteria have been set to identify those high-risk freights and shipments, particularly those that might have an impact on the safety and security of the EU citizens. but also
criteri servono per fornire una protezione
they are required to provide an equal level of protection along the entire external frontier of the European Union. Protection, which implies the fact that no goods are allowed in that are to be considered as illegal or illicit. Of course, these control criteria are not applied only when goods are checked at the borders of the EU territory. There are other moments when these controls can be performed. So for other types of shipments, actually then when cargoes are submitted to the customs authorities because they are declared there, the responsibility for what is being declared on that occasion, of course, is assigned to the person who makes the declaration on behalf of the business of the industry. So let's say that the business is always in charge of the business importing or exporting the goods is always responsible for what is being declared at the customs when importing or exporting the goods, even though this declaration is made by the customs declarant. Hence, this risk management system has the goal not only to identify these high-risk shipments, but also to protect the external frontiers, borders of the European Union. So, how is this framework system practically implemented? The intention is to equip the different customs administrations with a quick tool and an easy-to-use tool to exchange information between the different customs authorities to implement and attain the goals aiming at controlling, checking, and detecting any possible cargoes that might not be safe, that are dangerous, or that offer no guarantee as regards safety and security. This tool, which also allows exchanging information between the EU customs authorities and also at the level of the risk analysis centers in the different member states, is provided by the risk information form, which is filled in online and which is immediately made available to all the customs offices connected together. So this is the operating tool that customs authorities have to immediately exchange the information related to cargoes that have been identified and detected or that are even only suspected of being highly risky. This risk information form contributes, of course, to an equivalent level of customs control at the external border of the EU to identify possible new risks. It provides the necessary level of protection identified within the customs risk management framework for citizens and European financial interests and also those of the member states, of course. And this tool, harmonized at EU level, establishes an equivalent fair treatment allowing the same opportunities and the same critical issues for all the traders throughout the Union. Hence, to summarize, this custom risk management framework aims at providing an equivalent level of protection, appropriate protection within its own provisions throughout the whole European Union in customs controls, performing controls at the borders, but also in other moments, as we said, when cargoes and freights are shipped, a harmonized application of customs controls on the freights and cargoes, a common approach as regards priorities identified with reference to control over customs risks, and also the allocation of resources to those resources which are required to perform these checks. So substantially, this represents a good balance, a proper compromise between customs controls in the different member states and the need of traders to legitimately trade in a fluid, smooth, facilitated way. These goals, according to the customs risk management framework of the EU, can be attained based on those so-called fundamental activities in the program, the 5 pillars of this customs risk management framework: the identification and control of high-risk goods movements using common risk criteria, as we said, the identification of priority control areas subject to a more intense controls for a specific period of time, the systematic and intensive exchange of risk information on the goods and freights between the customs through the customs risk management system framework. The 4th pillar is the contribution that is given by the certification as an authorized economic operator, which is released by the customs in the member states to those economic operators that meet specific criteria. Hence, these AEOs are hired as major partners to effectively guarantee and facilitate international legitimate trade, thus contributing to attaining the goals of the CRMS. The 5th pillar is that related to controls performed and risk analysis performed before the goods are shipped, based on the information sent in earlier on the goods, information which is given in electronic format by those who actually act somehow in the supply chain. However, these are professional operators, shippers, customs operators, and so on. And of course, this is required to tackle both security and safety risks related to traders, citizens, and of the EU financial conditions too. As regards the
implementazione di questo
effective,
Customs Risk
real
Management Framework, abbiamo poi
implementation of the customs risk
il
management
piano
framework, we
di
have
azione
the strategy
strategico,
and
insomma, dell'Unione
action
Europea.
plan of the
La
EU
strategia e il piano d'azione dell'Unione Europea per gestire questi rischi doganali
to manage
sono
these customs risks.
stati definiti già fin dal 2014.
Well, all these objectives have been defined back in 2014, and the plan includes gradual actions to attain the goals
del framework
of the framework
in maniera più coerente, più
in a more
efficace
consistent,
e anche in
effective
maniera
way, and also
più efficiente, se vogliamo,
in a more
in modo
efficient
tale,
way,
ecco, da contribuire
so
a
as to
facilitare le
contribute
dogane nei
to
vari Paesi membri
facilitating
a
the
gestire,
work of the
insomma,
customs
questi rischi
authorities
sulle
that
frontiere
can
esterne.
then tackle
Gli obiettivi
and
chiave
manage the risks at their outer
diciamo,
frontiers.
di questo piano
The
d'azione
main goals
strategico dell'Unione
of this
Europea in
strategy
materia
and
di
action plan at EU level
gestione dei rischi
regarding the management
doganali
of
sono
customs risks
rappresentati appunto
are
dalla
represented
qualità dei dati e
by the
dalla
quality
modalità
of
di
data
acquisizione dei dati stessi
and the
e
modality
quindi
to file them and
ecco,
store them.
si basa molto insomma sulla
It is hence
sul dato
basically based
informativo,
on
sulla
information
raccolta dei
data
dati, sulla
and
qualità dei dati, sulla
on the
disseminazione dei
collection
dati, ma anche sulla
quality and
condivisione di
filing
questi
of data,
dati
but
e
also on their
delle
on
informazioni.
its
Condivisione che chiaramente
sharing of information and
deve
data,
essere
sharing
fatta soprattutto
activity
tra
which
le
is to
autorità
be performed
doganali.
involving the different customs
Poi ecco,
authorities first.
diciamo che l'altro obiettivo è quello di
Let's say that the other
consentire
objective is
controlli
to
efficienti
allow
e
efficient
mitigare
controls
anche il rischio
and risk
doganale per quanto riguarda
mitigation
le merci che
at
vengono
customs level as
entrate a livello
regards the
internazionale. Mi
goods
riferisco
moved at
chiaramente a quelle
international
che
level with reference
in qualche
to those,
maniera
of
vengono
course,
movimentate,
that
avvalorate nel
somehow are
territorio comunitario,
moved
per quanto
within the
sviluppo anche
EU
delle
territory.
capacità dei
The
vari
development
operatori
of
chiamati a
the
effettivamente
different
controllare
traders and operators'
le
capacities,
merci
those
che
specifically
da
that
implementare
are in
per
charge
la
of
gestione del
monitoring
registro delle
the
merci e
freights
gli operatori, in
and
questo caso
implementing
doganali,
these risk
quindi
management
proprio gli ufficiali
activities,
doganali
in this
appunto
case, customs servants, of course,
delle varie, ecco, delle varie risorse doganali che sono effettivamente
within the
chiamate
different
sul fronte,
offices and
diciamo,
resources
strettamente
that
operativo
are
a
practically
svolgere
hands-on
queste
involved
attività.
in
E
doing
poi
all
chiaramente
these activities.
ci sono i tre obiettivi legati
Then
alla
clearly the three
cooperazione,
goals linked
la
to
cooperazione nelle
cooperation,
dogane con le altre
interagency cooperation,
agenzie
customs cooperation with the other
governative, la
agencies,
cooperazione nelle dogane con
the
i vari operatori
cooperation
economici
with
e la
traders,
cooperazione in
and
materia doganale a
cooperation
livello
as
internazionale. Quindi,
regards
come
the international
possibile
level.
vedere da questo
So
schema,
how, as you can see here,
la cooperazione che è
cooperation,
stabilita come uno degli obiettivi
which is
nel
one
Customs
of
Risk
the
Management Framework,
goals of the EU
è la
Customs Risk
medesima
Management Framework, is exactly the same
cooperazione strutturata su tre livelli che
cooperation
appunto sta proprio
structured
invece
on
nel
three
programma
levels,
SAFE,
which is
ovvero
given
il
in the
programma
SAFE program.
implementato
That is
dall'Organizzazione
the program
Mondiale delle Dogane.
implemented
E questo
by
proprio
the
comprova
EU,
chiaramente il
the
fatto che
WCO. And
il
this
quadro normativo
entails
dell'Unione
the fact
Europea
that
e regolatorio, anche se vogliamo,
the
dell'Unione Europea in
regulatory
materia di
EU regulatory framework
gestione
as
dei rischi
regards
doganali
the management
comanda
of
proprio da
customs
quello che è il
risks
programma SAFE
originates from the SAFE
dell'Organizzazione Mondiale delle Dogane, quindi
program
chiaramente
from
l'Unione
the
Europea
WCO,
per il tramite chiaramente in
which
persona,
the
insomma,
EU,
a veste di ogni Paese membro,
through
fa
its
parte.
single member states, is
Andiamo avanti,
a
vediamo un
part
po',
of.
visto che abbiamo
Let's go on
così
and
nominate quelle che sono le
let's
priority control
see
areas,
the
ovvero queste
priority
aree di
control
controllo
areas, hence
prioritarie su
these
cui si basa anche
PCAs,
il piano strategico, insomma,
upon which
delle
the
dogane
customs
comunitarie per la
strategy
gestione dei rischi
plan
doganali
is based.
queste aree di controllo prioritario
And these priority
rappresentano un
control
po'
areas
il
represent somehow
meccanismo
the key
per quanto
mechanism
riguarda l'implementazione
as regards the implementation
del framework
of
sui controlli doganali
the
comunitari.
framework
Perché
on
grazie
EU
a
customs
a questo
controls,
meccanismo l'Unione
because
Europea
thanks to
può
this mechanism,
individuare
the
aree
EU
specifiche
can identify
per quanto
specific
riguarda
areas to
i
be
controlli
prioritized
doganali
as
per un tempo
regards
magari
customs controls,
determinato.
maybe for a defined period of
Queste
time.
aree di controllo
These
prioritario sono
priority
i
control
controlli doganali
areas are
rafforzati
subject to
che
customs
vengono svolti
controls,
in
to
maniera
strengthened
coordinata
customs
e
controls
basate
performed
sempre
in a
sugli
coordinated
stessi
manner and
criteri
always
di
based
valutazione del
on the
rischio
same common
che
risk
sono messi
assessment
a disposizione
criteria
dalle varie autorità doganali comunitarie
put
e che
together
sono anche
by the
diciamo
different
scambiati in
EU
tempo reale.
customs authorities that are exchanged in real
I
time.
settori prioritari
The
possono
priority
riguardare, quindi
areas
queste aree
may
prioritari possono riguardare
concern
qualsiasi tipo di regime
any
doganale, qualsiasi
kind of
tipologia
customs
di prodotto,
procedure,
commercio,
types of
qualsiasi
goods,
come dire, mezzo di trasporto piuttosto che modalità di
traffic routes
trasporto,
or
quindi
means of transportation
per quanto riguarda sia i vettori, se vogliamo, ma
as
anche la tipologia,
regards
insomma,
both
di
shippers
trasporto,
and
ma
the
anche
type of
stessi operatori
transportation, but also the
economici.
various same economic operators,
Queste
the traders.
aree sono selezionate
These
quindi
areas are then
per essere
selected
soggette a livelli
to be
diversi, più
uh,
elevati, insomma, di analisi di rischio nei
subject to
controlli,
increased
in un
levels
periodo
of
però
risk
ecco,
analysis.
predeterminato,
However, for a
quindi
predefined
deve essere
limited
una
period,
misurazione
hence
della data da cui
a
appunto
start
parte
date is to be
questo controllo
identified
organizzato,
for the beginning of
questa
this
area di
increased
controllo individuata
level of
e
control
così
on
come deve
this
essere anche
priority
prevista insomma
area,
una data
and altogether
di fine insomma
an
di
end
questo
date
controllo
must
rafforzato
also be
e
defined,
possibilmente ecco le dogane sono anche
and
come dire
possibly customs
caldeggiate a fare un esame intermedio
are should
quindi
also
ecco dovrebbero
perform
anche
interim
verificare
reviews to check
tra l'inizio di validità di quest'area di controllo
between
prioritario e la
start
fine
date
individuata,
and end date
prevedere insomma
of
un
the
esame per
enhanced
verificare che ci siano
levels of
ancora le
controls.
circostanze, siano ancora consistenti
Well, they
le,
should perform
i rischi, le criticità
reviews
rilevate
to
che hanno
understand whether the
giustificato
critical
l'assestamento
issues that
insomma
justified
di
the
quell'area alle
beginning
sue
of the
priorità.
higher levels of risk analysis and
E,
customs controls are justified or not
ecco,
anymore.
chiaramente
Clearly,
le aree di controllo prioritario che sono stabilite dalle
PCAs
dogane comunitarie
defined
sono,
by EU borders and customs
sono soggette a
are
una valutazione
subject
a livello
to
superiore per
a
evitare che
higher
magari
assessment
quello che è stato
to avoid
stabilito per un controllo
that
rafforzato
what
non rischi
was
di,
defined for a
di
strengthened
essere, come
control
dire, una misura sproporzionata rispetto
does
magari a
not
quella che
become
è l'obiettivo da
disproportional as a
raggiungere,
measure
oppure
compared
magari
to the goal to
non rischi
attain,
di essere perturbata,
or
se vogliamo, in maniera indebita,
for it not to
proprio sui
become
traffici,
unduly
sulle tipologie di
disruptive
traffici,
in terms of some
per alcuni
types
operatori
of
economici, magari per alcune
some
tipologie, insomma,
specific
di spedizioni
traders, specific types
all'interno
of
quindi di un paese membro
shipments
o di
within a
più,
member state
oppure
or
in prossimità di un
at
porto, una
a
frontiera
specific
stabilito appunto
port
come
or
soggetti
frontier
a
point
controllo prioritario. Ecco.
given as priority
E,
controlled
per quanto
parties.
riguarda
As regards
le aree di controllo prioritario che sono
PCAs,
state magari
those
già
PCAs that
adottate dall'Unione
were
Europea
somehow
in
already
collaborazione
adopted
con
by
altri
the EU
paesi,
in
possiamo
collaboration with the
citare
different member
quella
states.
cui
We can
parlavo poco fa,
mention, for
quella
instance,
sui
the action on
controlli,
counterfeit
piuttosto che
medicine, drug
sulla produzione
precursors,
di prodotti tessili,
or the
oppure
assessments of
contrabbando di sigarette, dove
textiles,
il controllo
smuggling of
ecco,
cigarettes,
determini
or
cosiddetti dual
control
use,
of the so-called dual
così
use goods.
come insomma è possibile capire. E qui
As you
parliamo
can
di
understand, we are here
aree di controllo
talking
prioritario relative
about
ad alcune
PCAs
tipologie
related
insomma,
to
di
some
merci.
types of goods.
Per quanto riguarda la cooperazione
And
internazionale
when
in
it comes
termini
to the
di
international
approvvigionamento
cooperation for the supply chain,
con riferimento sempre insomma alle
and
questioni della
with
sicurezza,
reference to
cosa possiamo
safety
dire?
and
Chiaramente
security management,
in un contesto attuale fortemente
In an actual
informatizzato,
context,
fortemente
highly
digitalizzato,
digitalized,
servizi relativi insomma alla
also
supply
these
chain, quindi tutto quello
services
che
that
riguarda
concern
le
the
attività
supply chain
strumentali
and all the
destinato
other
insomma
support
al funzionamento delle
activities
catene di approvvigionamento
for the supply chain itself
sono fondamentali insomma appunto
become
per il
fundamental
commercio internazionale
for the international trade.
chiaramente ecco questi servizi supply chain possono però
So the supply
essere indicati
chain
dei profili di
services
rischio a livello
may
come dire
also
a
have some
livello di
risk
scambio di
profiles
dati
when it comes
transfrontaliero
to
quando
the
sono individuati
exchange of
come
cross-border
infrastrutture
data,
critiche
because they have already been identified as
quindi ecco è
critical
fondamentale che ci sia la
infrastructures.
collaborazione tra tutti
Therefore,
coloro
it is
che
fundamental to
effettivamente
have a full
operano
collaboration
in questi
among
contesti
traders and
di frontiera
customs and in general all the actors involved
quali sono
in the
tutti i soggetti che
uh,
possono effettivamente trovarsi a
transportation of goods.
interloquare e che in questa collaborazione vanno a utilizzare,
So
vanno a
within this
fornire
collaboration,
servizi digitali
we can
che
find
sono
different
molto
actors
complessi, ma
also
devono
providing
essere
complex
critici, soprattutto con
digital
riferimento ai
services
trasporti, alle
in
finanze,
critical
alla
sectors
sanità,
such
insomma,
as transport,
a tutto quello che
finance,
riguarda un po'
health,
l'aspetto istituzionale e di
and
governo. E qui
institutional
vediamo
or
chiaramente le
governmental
autorità,
services. So
vari
all those
aeroporti,
actors can be, for
ferrovie,
example,
porti, fonti di
airport
energia, banche,
authorities,
società di logistica,
railways, ports,
operatori
energy
economici, quindi
providers, banks,
veri e
logistic and
propri,
transport
ecco, che
companies,
effettivamente
and
poi
businesses
vanno a
or companies in
produrre e a
general.
scambiare
So all
le
those
merci.
actors in charge
Quindi,
of
ecco,
producing and shipping
è
goods.
chiaro che in questa collaborazione, in questo quadro di attività interconnesse,
Within
molto
those
informatizzate
interconnected,
anche critiche
digitalized,
proprio
and
per quanto
critical
riguarda poi
activities, and so within
la necessità di
this
andare a intercettare
cooperation,
le attività che minano la
there is, of
sicurezza delle
course, the
supply
need
chain.
to better identify the activities that
Ecco,
may
è
represent
fondamentale
a
andare
threat for the entire supply chain.
a fornire ecco,
And it is
un
therefore
quadro
necessary to provide
di collaborazione, o meglio,
a collaboration framework,
dare insomma delle
or better said,
linee guida
it
per
is necessary
una
to provide some
collaborazione
guidelines
operativa
in
fra
order
appunto
to
queste
put in place an
interdipendenze
operational
che vengono
collaboration.
sperimentate quotidianamente nell'attività lavorativa e
So
professionale
all those
dei
activities that
soggetti che
are
intervengono
carried out on a daily basis
nell'approvvigionamento.
by the different
Ecco,
actors
siano
involved
in
in
grado
the
poi
supply chain
come dire, di funzionare in maniera corretta, di
need to work
evitare
in a
intrusioni,
proper way, correct
intrusioni
way. It is necessary
nella
to
linea di
avoid all
funzionamento per
types
evitare
of
che poi ci siano ecco,
interruptions
degli
and
effetti
obstacles
a
within the
cascata
supply chain effect,
altre
within the supply chain
infrastrutture
itself,
piuttosto
in
che
order to
servizi
avoid any cascading
che
effects.
dipendono insomma da queste a livello chiaramente nazionale, ma
And of
soprattutto a
course, this
livello
is true on a
transfrontaliero.
national level, but also
E quindi ecco,
transborder
è
level.
opportuno che ci sia una più che collaborazione, proprio una
So more than a
operatività
collaboration, it is necessary to put in
coordinata,
place a
interdipendente
coordination
che ecco, se
of the
vogliamo
different
sia
operations
tutta
that are carried
orientata
out on a daily
non poi per la
basis,
parte di
and
spettanza, per
every
l'attività di
actor
spettanza, che sia
involved
tutta orientata
in this
al medesimo obiettivo, quindi al raggiungimento del
structure
medesimo
and
obiettivo.
collaboration need to work in order
E quindi ecco,
to
proprio la
reach
ristrutturazione
a specific goal
informatica
or a shared goal.
a livello hardware ma anche a livello software, ancora più a livello software, chiaramente
So the IT
è particolarmente però
management
vulnerabile e è diventata bersaglio
can be
di
pretty
vari
vulnerable,
attacchi che
and it has
da
already
parte di,
been
se vogliamo, cyber
attacked several times by some cyber terrorists. We can call them like that. And so when those IT infrastructures and digital infrastructure, informational infrastructures are attacked, even at a local level, there is, of course, a cascade effect that also has some consequences on other systems that may rely on that local system. In this case, I'm talking about national, but also cross-border systems. And there can be also some consequences on the international plan. So the European Union needs to foster the safety of those international operations. And in order to do that, in a near future, a new update or a new implementation of the actual customs risk management system will be released. So if the cooperation between European customs and the international customs is extremely necessary and fundamental, because of course we're living in a globalized world and a highly digitalized world, then it is also necessary and fundamental to inspect goods and freight in an efficient way when those goods arrive within the European Union. In order to do that, some working groups have been created in order to foster the cooperation and the coordination at a practical level between customs administrations and other authorities and agencies. So these groups are made up of the managers of the external land borders, so ports and airports within the European Union, and a number of contact groups in order to assure a great level of control and trade facilitation for legitimate trade at the external frontiers of the European Union. And of course, all the different external frontiers, such as ports and airports, belonging to the contact groups. So first of all, we have the ROLF contact group, and it is a contact group of customs managers working in the major northern ports of the European Union. And it comprises representatives from the ports of Rotterdam, Antwerp, Le Havre, Hamburg, and also Bilbao in Spain. And then we have the Odisur contact group, working in the major southern ports of the EU. The Icarus contact group, that comprises representatives from the airports of Brussels and Paris and Germany, Lisbon in Portugal, and so on and so forth. And then the Land Frontier Contact Group, LFCG, and this is a network of contact points that are called practitioners, which manages the customs situational picture across the external land frontier of the European Union. And within the Land Frontier Contact Group, we have representatives from 16 countries with European external land borders, such as, for example, Austria, Bulgaria, Croatia, Estonia, Finland, and France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Sweden. And within this same group, we also have the representation of approximate 250 border crossing points for the different transport modes, such as road, rail, and non-commercial. So not only commercial goods. And then concerning the international cooperation to improve customs risk management, we can also mention the ISACC project. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the ISACC project because we have already analyzed it last week during the previous webinar. I just would like to point out some of the main aspects of the ISACC project for those who were not able to take part into the previous webinar of November 18th. So the ISACC project is an innovative system to enhance anti-fraud customs control, and it represents a real answer to a challenge that is present among Italy, Albania, and Montenegro, that are also the partner countries of this project. So important commercial partners, and within each country, the customs and customs authorities play an important role in order to verify the different goods on a constant and ongoing basis in order to streamline the different supply chain, but they also play an important role when it comes to avoid any type of illicit trade. So this project has been specifically designed to respond to this challenge, to keep on avoiding any type of frauds from an international point of view by using IT strategies, but also other models and structures able to simplify and harmonize the controls and inspections of trade of goods, that are carried out within those three countries. At the basis of the ISACC project, there is also an important preliminary activity carried out by the Albanian Customs Authority, but also the Italian Customs Authority. So we were also able to create a consortium in order to take part into this Interreg IPA2 cross-border program concerning the period 2014-2020. So this application was then approved in September 2020, and therefore the ISACC project took place. The main goal of this project is to define a so-called customs footprint, consisting in a digital form that include all information and parameter of a good, aiming to verify in intermediate stages, that is to say the customs control points, the invariance of the generated information through automatic data analysis systems and geo-tracking information elaborated by artificial intelligence technologies and so modern technologies. As we said during the previous webinar, the project is divided and based on 3 pillars. So first of all, building up of an international network of public institutions and in the customs sector, then design, develop, and pilot the IT platform supporting customs controls activities and all the activities that need to be carried out by the different customs authorities of those 3 countries. And the last pillar, there is to say the capacity building for customs servants, focusing on the use and functionalities of the ISACC platform, but also a specific training and capacity building addressed to private stakeholders. So all the traders that may be interested in this project. So not only economic operators or traders, but also services suppliers for customs. And of course, everything is focused on e-customs procedures. The project leader is ITS Logistica Puglia in Italy, based in Italy. That is to say, the Technical Institute Foundation for Higher Education on Mobility. And we have several partners, such as the University of Salento in Italy, the Chamber of Commerce of Molise in Italy, University of Montenegro, Institute of Transport in Albania, Customs and Monopolies Agency, Directorate General of Customs in Albania and in Montenegro. So let's move on and let's have a look at the different controls and checks carried out by the Italian customs authorities within, again, the European customs risk management on the basis of the customs control circuit. So the risk analysis is carried out upstream of those trading and shipment activities, but also upstream of the movement of goods that are received by the European customs and before shipping them to the country of destination. So this risk analysis is carried out thanks to the centralized risk analysis system, the so-called customs control circuit, that allows to identify the level of risk associated with the type of goods handled and moved, and therefore the type of control to be performed on the different goods. Checks and controls will then influence the times and methods of that are necessary to clear those goods. Sometimes it is necessary to put in place automated controls, but also document controls may be necessary, or even goods inspections. And in some other cases, it is necessary to scan the different goods, and so it is necessary to carry out a scanner control system. When it comes to product safety, the verification activity carried out at customs is also associated with the intervention of the Italian Minister of the Italian Ministry of Safety, and in some cases, including the analysis activity of our chemical laboratories and other bodies. So what about the Italian system in order to clear goods? First of all, the goods needs to be presented at customs by the trader. There is also the need of a specific document, the so-called single administrative document that needs to be provided, plus other certificates and documents according to the type of goods and to the country of destination. Once the goods are presented in order to be exported, it is also necessary to pay the customs duties, and this needs to be done by the company that is exporting. After that, it is necessary to carry out a risk analysis. So if customs control circuit do not establish any type of control, then the good can receive the so-called green light in order to be shipped to the country of destination. Some other times it is necessary to carry out an inspection of the documents that are attached to the goods, or in some other cases, it may be necessary that the customs control circuit asks for goods inspections. So in this case, the code is the yellow color, and it means that the goods cannot be cleared, cannot be immediately cleared, but it is necessary to carry out some extra inspections on those goods. Some other times it is also necessary to scan the goods, and only if there is a positive outcome of those complementary and extra controls, the goods can receive the green light in order to be delivered to the country of destination. So, when it comes to document controls, it is necessary to assess and verify that all the information included and stated in those documents are correct, and also the information included in the attached documents, commercial documents. And when it comes to goods inspections, sometimes the procedure is more complicated and complex, because when operators carry out a goods inspection, they do not only assess the value of goods, the origin of goods, the duties, and all the other taxes. So all the other taxes relevant to that type of goods. But during goods inspections, some other types of controls may be carried out. So controls that are not linked to taxes and that are not linked to the documents that are attached to the goods. So, for example, operators may double check if goods are in line, are compliant with intellectual property rules, for example, or industrial property rules. They may double check if the label has been certified or not, if there is the made in logo, if the logo has been certified or not, if it is true or fake, and in general, if the goods are compliant with all the regulations for the protection of final customers. So those extra inspections can be carried out by goods when goods arrive, can be carried out by customs, sorry, when goods arrive at customs, in order to double check if goods are in line and compliant with other rules and laws of the European Union, of the specific country, and other sectorial laws. So, for example, laws concerning the type of product, the type of label that is applied, the intellectual property, and so on and so forth. So there is a complete and total control on those imported goods especially, but also on exported goods, because when it comes to export, goods need to comply with the so-called export controls laws. So not only dual use, for example, and all the different limitations and that were put in place over the last few months because of the war between Russia and Ukraine, but also all the other laws concerning exports, so cultural heritage, cheetahs, for example, and other products containing dog or cat fur, for example, weapons, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of different regulations that goods needs to comply with when it comes to import and export.
So let's try to now deep dive into the AEO profile, which lies at the basis of the cooperation and collaboration between traders and customs, both as regards the SAFE program of the World Customs Organization and as regards the whole regulatory framework regarding customs risks management of the EU. Practically, the AEO is an economic operator that voluntarily, because there's no obligation to be certified, of course, but actually, so traders voluntarily need to meet a range of criteria, and that can thus be considered as compliant with these customs security standards, compliant with them, with a special regard to the regulations of the single European member state. And this actually entitles a trader to enjoy the benefits throughout the whole EU as regards these issues. This is in very short the definition of an AEO. As a matter of fact, the AEO is a very complex profile and a quite well-structured one. From the point of view of the EU, it was introduced within the customs regulations well before the implementation of the new customs regulation. So it was introduced back in 2008. With a regulation that included some security amendments to the Community Customs Code that was applicable at the time, hence number 2913 of 1992, the first customs code the EU set up. However, later on, the AEO profile was further submitted to other regulations and enhancements. Hence, we can then find a quite complete legal framework, because later on Additional updates have come up in the meantime, and hence this full framework regulation is within the UCC, and the three codes that make up for the customs code to be applied in the EU, that is regulation number 952 of 2013, the Commission implementing regulation 2447 of 2014, and the Commission delegated regulation 2446 again of 2015 that were adopted on May 11th, 2006. The update is made regularly as regards to specific aspects, particularly linked to the enhancements of this certification and profile. However, let's say that the basic framework is in this context adopted, as we said, back in 2006, and additional guidelines on the AEO program were amended, again published by the EU later on after 2008. What are these guidelines about? First, they do clarify the general concept of an AEO profile as shortly described before. It is possible to find these general information on what an AEO is, who can become an AEO, and the different categories of AEOs, because as we will see, there are several possible categories for this profile. The guidelines also include a description of the benefits linked to obtaining the AEO certification with special reference to those benefits that can be somehow used following the mutual recognition agreements, implementing a customs implementation system and profiles like the AEOs, benefits that can be mutually recognized between AEO in EU and other AEOs in third-party countries. There's a detailed description of the AEO eligibility criteria to attain this certification, and in the same way, a detailed explanation is given as regards the process to apply for the certification and also the different steps. Okay, perfect. Let's resume the works. I was talking about the guidelines of the AEO certification that were issued by the European Union. So I was talking about the criteria that were identified to ask for and obtain this customs certification by the economic operators. Clearly, the application is to be filed at the own reference customs with reference to the place where the business has its seat. However, the application is to be attached to other documents required, demanded by the customs regulations, and hence the whole detail of the authorization process is given in the guidance, particularly what follows the reception of the application by the trader. Then there's a section devoted to AEO requirements with special reference to the businesses that can be identified as SMEs. Hence, there are different assessments to be made compared to those assessments usually made on larger businesses, specifically by those customs authorities that will have to assess the application. A section of the guide provides information to the operators as regards sections and factors that help businesses speed up the authorization process, with a special attention paid during the audit of the business itself. Guidance also has a section reserved to the customs authorities to understand how they need to assess the companies. However, a part of these assessment criteria are available for economic operators too, to help with those all those implementation procedures in view of the AEO certification obtained. There's then a specific section on showing how the monitoring activities are performed for the already authorized AEOs. And a final part of the guide is related to the cooperation between AEOs, customs in different countries, depending on these mutual recognition programs drawn up between the EU and other member states that have implemented AEO certifications similarly. As regards the criteria, first we have to say that these criteria businesses must have before applying to AEO certification are somehow common, but they also depend on the type of AEO certification the business intends to attain. This means that the AEO certification can be a simple AEO certification for the customs, or it can be an AEO profile, but intended with a special regard to safety and security. Hence, we are going to have an AEOC or an AEOS, where S stands for security. These two types of authorizations can be held concurrently in one single certification if the business is interested in both types of certifications. Hence, from this point of view, the AEO, in want of obtaining the AEO certification for customs, so AEOC, will have to be compliant with the tax and customs regulations, and will also have to demonstrate that the same has not committed any crime related to these customs and tax sectors. In addition, the applicant must also have a management system of the own terms and activities that is effective, so that this speeds up the controls by the customs authorities, and also the financial solvency must be quite proven with reference to the 3 years before the application. Clearly, if the company started the activity less than 3 years before application, these assessments will be performed based on the information available when the business applies for the certification. So these are some criteria that apply to both AEO customs and security. So these are common to both interpretations of the customs certification. In addition, we have one more criteria, which is only for AEO customs, that is the attainment of a certification proving practical standards of competence or professionalism that are appropriate to manage all the related customs activities, those related to the AEO profile within the business. Hence, a human resource will have to be in charge of customs activities, specifically trained to comply with this role. And this certification is obtained in Italy at least following attendance of a course of about 200 hours, which is organized by a university or an association or different training partners that identify a training path in line with the AEO requirements, and the very same course has to be approved by the Italian customs authorities. And you can actually you can view the list of all the universities, partners, and trade associations that can organize courses on the website of the Italian customs under the AEO profile. As regards the economic operator that intends to obtain an AEO certification in the safety and security field, the very same AEO shall have to demonstrate in the audit that the same possesses safety and security standards that are specific as required by AEO, and additional requirements will then apply and will have to be complied with. Of course, the assessment of the requirements by the customs authority will be made considering the type of economic operator, if the business is a manufacturing business or a marketing business, if it's logistics or a shipper or a vector, and actually also considering the size and of the organization, considering the role the business plays within the supply chain at international level. What does this mean? It means that the AEO certification is not to be applied for by only AEOs intending as commercialization or manufacturing businesses. The AEO certification can be applied for by any operator intervening within an international supply chain process. So manufacturing, commercialization, marketing companies, but also those who work within the context of customs, shipping, and so on in their different roles. Because the final goal of the AEO certification is not to guarantee one single business, but the whole supply chain in which that business is part of. Hence, where it plays a role somehow. So partners are also important. In this chart, I have summarized the conditions and criteria to obtain the AEO, but let's have a look at the benefits now. Why should a business apply for the AEO? Because there are some advantages, some benefits, which can be referred to the attainment of this certification. Benefits that can be divided into direct benefits and indirect benefits. Direct benefits include fewer controls during customs checks and controls, and consequently also a check on custom clearance times, because lower controls, fewer controls means also less time needed. Then also specific benefits in terms of clearance through predefined customs regimes, with the possibility to identify one single customs point where all inbound and outbound goods can be channeled, the possibility to perform customs services in all the European member states, not only in the own national ones. Then benefits in terms of temporary permissions. Further benefits and enhancements in terms of the results obtained from the controls at customs levels, having the possibility of controls being performed in a specific role identified by the business and not by the customs, and the possibility to use facilitated systems for customs clearance of inbound goods specifically. And this customs simplification, however, is not fully operating at the moment. We are getting there. However, it's going to be implemented, however, within short, just like the one of the registration within the accounting reports. So with the possibility of declaring goods at the customs without presenting them. However, you need to be an AEO certified operator. Indirect benefits, of course, include a privileged relationship to the customs authorities, because the customs authorities have already verified the compliance of that business with the customs requirements. All safety and security requirements required are complied with, and also the possibility to be acknowledged as a safe commercial trade partner at international level, of course, in the countries where these mutual recognition agreements have been signed. With who? These benefits, of course, can be more or less specific depending on the type of AEO, but also depending on the type of business that applied for it and attained that. Clearly, benefits for importers and for exporters can be different, just like benefits for economic operators compared to shippers. Let's now get to the point connected with the application. How should the application be filed? As for competence, as I said, it's the one, it's assigned to the national one where the business has its seat and trade records, and usually this competence is connected to the main seat. Then alternative competence sites are offered too, with there are some exceptions to this general rule based on competence depending on the seat of the business. It is, however, restated that the AEO is a voluntary certification. There's no obligation to have it. But once you decide to apply for it, you cannot refer to the customs or one custom authority of your choice. As regards competence, competence is ruled very strictly, so it is not possible that the operator can choose to which party the certification application is to be filed. Starting from 2019, the filing of the AEO application can be made through the EU Trader portal. This date was defined as of which it was compulsory to file the AEO application at the portal. Actually, this, however, is not that strict, but in time we got to this exclusive modality for the filing of the AEO application, and clearly to access the EU Trader portal, it is required to be authorized as users by both the competent customs authority of the nation where the business has its seat, that will have to give the credentials to access the IT customs systems in general. And of course, additional credentials will also be required to access the EU Trader portal with a EU-wide application level. Clearly, the application can also be filed through delegated parties that will have to be accredited for doing that. However, together with the application, the operator must also present a self-assessment questionnaire together with the own application, a questionnaire whose goal is to help the applying business to understand the requirements associated with obtaining the AEO status, providing very specific customs. So additional information compared to what is given in the application. Of course, this self-assessment questionnaire will also serve as a guideline for the audit, the customs audits at the business seat to check that all the criteria we saw before to have been complied by the very same business, hence the records, the financial solidity, the safety and security aspects, in addition to clearly those competencies assigned to those in charge of the customs activities to help the applicant fill in the self-assessment questionnaire. The EU has drawn up some notes, explanatory notes, that provide information on how actually the questionnaire should be filled in. As I said, then once the customs receive the application, an audit program will be set up at the company regarding both documents, IT systems, the management administration system, if the company has warehouses, warehouse procedures will also be checked and complied with. These are the audit activities, and then they will check how the business works, depending on the type of activity, whether that's a service, manufacturing, or commercialization company business. And so an audit plan will be set up in full. What can I add? Businesses that are already certified according to ISO 9001, that are already used working process by process, are definitely benefited in the implementation of this activity to realize and make effective what is required for the attainment of the AEO. So the requisites and the AEO indications within the own business activity for the purposes of the customs activities, transports, shippings at international level. As regards this network of AEOs, this collaboration between all the countries that have that abide by such a certification program. Well, at the moment, the mutual recognition programs have been signed with Norway, Switzerland, Japan, Andorra, the US, China, and the United Kingdom. Clearly, further negotiations for mutual recognition agreements are underway, and this extends the width of the AEO program for all the attending parties to benefit from those advantages we've seen so far regarding their own international activities. Hence, these facilitations and benefits will not only be applied, for instance, as regards an AEO operator on the EU territory, but these are going to be applied also if this EU AEO exports to Switzerland, to Norway, Japan, or importing from Switzerland, Norway, Japan, and so on, and vice versa, of course. So, less controls related to the safety and security of the goods, fewer security and safety related controls, recognition of business partners during the application phase, and the information validation phase leading to the AEO certification attainment, priority treatment at customs clearance, and the possibility to have a business continuity mechanism for whoever move goods at international level. And this is particularly important for shippers, carriers, and different logistics. Clearly, not all these benefits are given in all mutual recognition agreements, because there's no standard of a mutual recognition agreement. They depend on the single agreements.
So in this chart, you can see the different IAO authorizations that are provided by the different European authorities in a range of time from 2008 to 2022. So starting from when this new profile of authorized economic operator has been launched up to the beginning of this year. As you can see, it first started with a very limited participation, and then a greater participation was seen little by little through the years, and especially after the approval of the Code of Customs and the different updates concerning the regulation. So we can see that nowadays there is a huge increase of authorized economic operators, also because and thanks to a promotion activity, or let's say a marketing activity carried out by the different customs through recent years. So we can definitely say that companies have been motivated over the years in order to apply for this certification, also because this opportunity is something well known right now. This is definitely an opportunity. It is not something mandatory, as I was saying before. Of course, it requires some efforts in order to comply with the different standards demanded by the customs in order to obtain the certification. Those efforts may have an impact on the production or the operational level of the different businesses and companies, on the organization of the company itself, but it can also benefit the company as a whole. So this can be seen as an added value, let's say, concerning the platform. And it also gives the possibility to the business to comply with the regulation ISO 9001. So let's move on to the last topic of this webinar in a very rapid way. This is the European anti-fraud system. It is based on the treaty on the functioning of the European Union states, in particular on Article 325, and it was designed in order to fight fraud and any other illegal activities affecting the financial interests of the European Union. And so this program, thanks to this program and to this system, the European Union can support the member states in order to fight against fraud and illegal activities. So the European Union can offer financial support, but also technical support, operational support when it comes to these specific topics, especially in some sectors such as the agricultural one, notably via the anti-fraud information system that is also called AFIS. There is also the irregularity management system, IMS, so that member states can report the different irregularities that are detected during customs controls. The program has a budget of around 181 million euros for the period 2021-2027, divided into different areas, as it is shown in this graph. Even if we don't have a lot of time right now, I would like to focus on the European Anti-Fraud Office, better known as OLAF. It was set up in 1991 to detect, investigate, and stop fraud, but also any other type of illegal activities, criminal activities affecting, again, the financial interests of the European Union. In 2013, Regulation number 883 implemented the role of the European Anti-Fraud Office. And so nowadays we can say that OLAF carries out some investigations related to the EU revenue when it comes to customs, illegal activities, but also for example, health and environment investigations or tobacco smuggling, but also investigations relating to serious misconduct by EU staff and members of the European institutions. And last but not least, investigations related to the European expenditure, to the European Union expenditure, any type of expenditure, actually. So including structural funds, agricultural programs, direct expenditure, and internal aid, for example. And once Olaf has completed an investigation, it is up to the European member state or the national authorities to examine and decide on the follow-up on Olaf's recommendations. In this slide, you can have a better look at the main activities carried out by Olaf. I don't want to repeat myself, but I just would like to say that Olaf also cooperates closely with police, customs, and judicial bodies within and beyond the European Union. And also thanks again to the Regulation 883 of 2013, a new close cooperation with the EPPO has been introduced. The EPPO is the European Office so it has a collaboration with the European Public Prosecutor's Office to enhance member state cooperation. So the European Public Prosecutor's Office was created in 2018 because the European Union estimated a loss of 140 billion euros in value-added tax, but also in terms of transnational frauds and illicit activities. So the European Public Prosecutor's Office should be able to coordinate and centralize all the inspections activities concerning different member states in order to contribute to harmonize the different verification and inspection procedures. The European Public Prosecutor's Office invests in different sectors, actually, such as fraud, corruption, money laundering, and cross-border VAT fraud. Again, the European Public Prosecutor's Office has a two-tiered structure, the central level and the national level. The central level is based in Luxembourg, and it collaborates with Olaf. And so we can definitely understand that Olaf represents an operational tool or instrument in order to carry out support inspection activities for the European Prosecutor's Office. So I'm sorry to jump in, Cristina, but I just would like to invite the participants to fill in the upcoming survey questionnaire. Yes, perfect. Okay, so we can start the survey right now. Actually, this is the end of my presentation, and I just would like to point out to mention the Italian Anti-Fraud Coordination Service, actually. It cooperates within the European Union with other commissions, committees, and entities and bodies in order again to fight against fraud and to improve fraud prevention policies and practices. The participants are representatives from the competent national services of the member states and from Commission services, and it is managed by Olaf on the Commission's behalf. So there is also the Advisory Committee for the Coordination of Fraud Prevention, the so-called COCOLAF, that analyzes the different profits of the European and revenues of the European Union. So under the COCOLAF umbrella, experts group had been set up to deal with specific issues such as fraud prevention, but also reporting and analysis of fraudulent and other irregularities, irregular activities. So every specific subgroup has specific competencies. So again, the fraud prevention group, reporting and analysis of fraudulent and other irregularities group. So this group carries out some analysis to fight against fraud and other illicit criminal activities that may be detected within the European Union. Then a third group, Anti-Fraud Coordination Service Group. It works on a national level. And then the OLAF Anti-Fraud Communicators Network. So this is just a communication network again, to fight against fraud. So at a national level, we have the AFCOS group. And in Italy, we have this specific committee to fight against fraud. So the Italian name is the Committee for Fight Against Community Fraud, COLAF. And it also collaborates, of course, with OLAF and all the other subgroups working within under the COCOLAF umbrella. So the Committee for the Fight Against the Community Fraud is based in the presidency of the Council of Ministers, Department of European Affairs, and it's strategically in a super-parties position in respect to the single, centralized, and peripheral administrations. It was created in May 2007, and it carries out different types of activities and actions, such as coordination at the national level, but also closing of open cases with the European Commission through the continuous and constant exchange of information with the management authorities in charge, again, to fight against any type of illicit activities, but also permanent study activities to propose the necessary legislative modification regarding recoveries and supporting institutional communication to guarantee accurate information on the activities that are currently taking place in the fight against fraud. So different types of activities and actions in order to fight against any type of illicit criminal activities that may be reported and detected within the European Union, but also a support towards, again, the institutional communication within the European Union and also with all the other member states. The Italian Anti-Fraud Coordination Service also coordinates the activities of COLAF with those of the community institutions. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Christina, but we really have to get to the conclusion of your presentation. Well, this is the really last slide I wanted to talk about. So the Italian Anti-Fraud Coordination Service also aims at developing permanent training activities at different levels, the publication of the names of beneficiaries of community financing and other types of activities. So this is just a summary of the different activities carried out by the Italian Anti-Fraud Coordination Service. Thank you very much for your patience. I know that we are pretty late, actually, but I had a lot of things to mention, as this is a very complex and complicated topic to deal with. I hope I was clear enough and able to provide you with some useful information information for all the main actors of this field that decided to take part into this webinar. Thank you very much, Cristina, for your explanation. I think that you were definitely able to provide our attendees with a complete framework and idea of this important topic. As you can see in this last slide, you can also find the email address of Cristina Piangatello. So if the different attendees need to contact you for any type of doubts or question, we may invite them to do so, because again, we're really running out of time. We don't have the possibility to ask questions right now. But anyway, I kindly invite you all to address directly your emails to Ms. Piangatello so that she can provide you answers to all your questions and doubts. So I just would like to thank again Ms. Piangatello. I just would like to thank also the interpreters for their patience and for their professionalism. I also would like to thank Promos Italy because it contributed to the success of these webinars for customs, but also for the operators of the sector. And I would like to thank the entire Promos team. I'm not going to mention them one by one, but they've all been fundamental in order to organize these webinars. I also would like to thank all the partners that are still on the line with us and that collaborated in order to promote this project and these webinars. And I just would like to conclude by saying that there will be a post-production of this webinar, of these webinars, sorry. So some demos will be available for all the people that were not able to take part into the live webinar, and we will let you know when those demos will be available. Thank you so much for your attention. Goodbye.